things out. So how white you go depends for these final highlights. You see these here? We're talking about the final highlights. So how white they are depends on how white your penultimate highlight is. This whole principle of roughly 20-25% jump each time. If you've got a really light penultimate highlight, then you've got to go whiter. If it's not very white, then if you went to pure white highlight, scenic they're called, then it would just be too big a jump. So I can't say definitively how white to make it. You just have to sort of play it by ear, depending on yours. Before you do this, we've got to discern if we're going to put any wash of Italian warm ochre over. You don't want to waste your time doing these, knowing you're going to wash it all anyway. So before you do this, perhaps I can have a look at where you are and say, actually, you need to put another layer of penultimate or give it a wash or something.
And what are you putting over it?
So I won't put anything on this. I think I've gone as far as enough. I just want to put the final whites on. So these, you might have two mixes. I'll tell you why, because you can see, here, perhaps not. Sometimes, to get a more gradual transition, I put in between the big ones. You can see between the really white ones, there's slightly less white ones in between. That's just one possible way of blending better. I think I might put the white ones, but I found it was too big a jump, so then I got one that's not quite so white and maybe a bit thinner and longer. So let's give that a go. So you want a brush with a really good point, but a bit of a valley, so that you can get this sort of, it's better here, you can get this thin, the point going through to a triangle. So you don't want these wiry. Most people in the beginning make them like wires. See, it starts at the point and gets really fat at the end. It's really important. Also, you notice the gap there. If you try to be ambitious and put too many in, you probably have them all touch, and it just looks like a big blob. All right? You've got to have a gap between so that there's a relationship between background and the highlight. So let's so look hard where you put them. You don't put them everywhere. So in this particular one, you've got three there, long, short, shorter, then two there, a long one there and two little short ones, just one here, you've got three here, one there. So these are just like the icing on the cake. I don't know the dirt. So let's do this one here. You might have to play around with it as to how white to have it or how opaque.
Excuse me, Aidan, you know you said with the beard, we're not doing the black bits on the beard yet. Are we doing them? But I just needed to darken.
Yeah, I didn't want you to jump straight into the black if you hadn't made the background darker. So do
Thank
them.
you. Yeah.
But perhaps don't make them pure black, make them a bit more, add a bit of your red and black in. So I'm just playing around a bit. It's got to be white enough to be sort of otherworldly. It's got to sort of be like a spark of the Holy Spirit shooting out from the person. So that's why it's calligraphic. It's of a slightly different order. It does relate to the form, but also, unlike anything else, it's really plainly calligraphic. It's not modelled. So the way I think of these is that, you know, those big balls you get and you crank something up and a big electrostatic charge builds up. When it gets really high, what happens between the balls?
These charges.
So it charges a jump, it's like. So it's like the saints sort of are so full of the Holy Spirit that you sort of, some of it shoots out. So these are like something that relates to the form, but on the other hand is something that's of a different order than the modelling of the flesh. So do this really carefully. You want to land gently and then push hard. So each one should be a triangle, not a line. And don't worry about a blob at the end. Don't worry if you make a blob. That's quite good actually, because it accentuates the fact that it starts as a point and ends a lot thicker. So it's like a tadpole really. You're making tadpoles. So you see I'm pointing it in the direction I'm moving. It's exactly as our first exercise, but these are so small, you're just actually using your wrist rather than your... It's the same principle. 45 degrees, point in the direction you're moving. Move in the air before you land, and a gentle landing and keep pushing down, so you get a triangle. what I would do is I'd make up a dark colour and do lots of practices on paper before you put it onto here, because you're probably going to mess it up first time. They're quite difficult to do. So I would get some card and do practices on dark paper, on dark paint on white paper, and actually practice what you're going to do in the right size as well. It's no use getting it right with a big line like that. In fact, you're going to make a small line. These are the more difficult ones. These, the thin, thick are the easiest. The top ones are more difficult. So thin, thick, thin. A long one, and then a short one above. So you get that sort of gradual ascent.
There's not too much water in this, is there? Right?
No, it's got to sort of be right, ideally first time. If it's too dilute, you've got to keep going over and over and over.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it should sort of grow out of the background and not be so opaque it doesn't relate to it. Sometimes I find, having done this, I feel that my penultimate highlight is actually not light enough. So again, I just mix up something between that and the previous one and actually build up the highlights and then go back to the white. So we'll see how. Or sometimes we put a more watered down version and just use that to model. Because it's really watered down, the yellow will come through. So all the time you're fine tuning to the nose. So this is where you divide into 3 sections, 1, 2, 3. The general principle with these is you put them where things are closer to you. So the nose is the closest, so that's got some of the strongest. There. The bottom here is like a big fat teardrop, often with a little bit on the side, just to act like a bit of a modelling. A nice proper shape there. And then around the lip there.
I missed it. Did you go down the nose?
Yep, down the middle of the nose. Often it's two, like thin, thick, thin, straight to one side, and then a little bit to the side, like that.
Oh.
The ears are important organs of a section, so we're going to put a strong white there, and then later on we'll put a strong red there below that, just to give it a bit of emphasis.
I've had to refind my ears. I forgot them. It's like you get so involved sometimes you don't realise you've painted 6 fingers. 6 fingers. I feel like a bit annoying.
So keep away from the ears. Don't put these right up against the previous highlight. Keep them away so you've got a bit of a soft edge there.
Above the lip.
What are those white flashes at the top? Are they the white flashes?
Yeah, I mean,
so
really,
you're going to have to put the dark in
you should
first.
put the dark in first.
Yeah.
But, anyway. To my mind, that's too big a jump, and I don't think I'll model this enough here. I did it on purpose, of course, so I can demonstrate. So what I'm going to do is get a more difficult version of this and actually basically re-establish the